Okay, listen.
There's echo in here.
Right. Echoing, just beer cans echoing across the universe.
Wow.
You know, when that auto replays on people's Facebook feeds, that's going to be a pretty special little sound effect right there. It's going to be a delicious sound indeed. So Chris, we are both drinking Space Cat beers from Space Cat Brewing Co. here in Norwalk, where I live. And if you were following everyone out there, FUMFA Live Social, you too could have joined us for a little happy hour. So you should follow us on Facebook and Instagram. It is a private group, so you will need to click a few extra buttons to join. We're trying to do a monthly happy hour, so you guys got to come out. And we were at Space Cat yesterday. It was a great time. Next month, we're planning to go back to our, perhaps our first brewery love, Nod Hill, which we talk about all the time.
Right.
And, I'm doing the pour. Oh, I'm not doing it right with the foam. Oh, I'm not doing it right. Oh, Chris, I'm not using this.
You amateur.
Oh, look how much.
Look at that.
Okay, well, I do drink plenty of beer. You did a much better job than me. Okay, so I drink plenty of beer, I really do, but I don't pour it very often. And maybe when I do pour it, I just think that I have a lot of time on my hands, perhaps. Oh, thanks, Mom. Mom's up in the chat. She said, hi, Chris and Katie. Thanks for all you do to make this happen every week. Well, thank you, Mom. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for showing up.
Our most loyal viewers.
Indeed, they haven't missed a show. They are the attendance award winners. And, we do have a lot of people on the, up at like almost catching almost every show. Midnight's up there. Susan M. Davis is up there.
Yeah.
I think Sarah Sleeper's show count is very high.
Indeed. I worry that people maybe don't have enough going on in their lives, or we're just so entertaining.
Chris, I am sure that it is the latter. The former, the latter, the latter.
That's my hope.
It's, how can people miss out on, this? No, I'm just kidding. We are delightfully entertaining, and we're doing our best to connect writing community, to celebrate people's writing, and to make sure we're doing that while being reasonably COVID safe. I mean, certainly in our homes we are. And, we are really percolating on in-person reading locations, especially for our anniversary reading the last Sunday in March, where we will be celebrating our 2-year anniversary from our first show in March 2020. Ooh, wow. We things are still hard, but we've come a long way. Everybody keep staying safe and staying as healthy as you can be out there. I know it's hard, but we're here for you. We're here with you.
With the healing power of literature
and writing community. Indeed. We have several folks joining us on Facebook, on YouTube. Throw a hello in the chat. Let us know that you're here. We also, maybe in case people have forgotten, we're also on Twitter now, and don't forget that we are on Instagram. So we are on all kinds of platforms now. And as soon as Instagram allows us, if they ever do, to stream live from StreamYard to Instagram, we will incorporate that as well.
You can keep up with us on Instagram, but right now you can't watch.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Which is strange because it's part of Meta. And
yes.
We're on Facebook.
Meta.
We're on Facebook, which is part of Meta. And, why not Instagram? Come on, Instagram, get it together.
Come on, Instagram. I feel like the name Meta is at once like it's almost too all-consuming, you know what I mean? It's like it's a mildly intimidating name. I remember the first time I heard that in a workshop, Colin Halloran, our friend, if anybody knows Colin Halloran, the wonderful poet who graduated soon after us, in the early years of the MFA. I remember sitting in the gazebo on Ender's Island, and he commented on a poem. He's like, "This is very meta." And I was like, you know, I had never quite heard that used in a workshop, but it was like the most appropriate word, but it was also the biggest word at the same time. And, you know, my poet brain just hears one word and I just feel everything associated with that. And it blew my mind.
Well, it's got a whole new meaning now. It's just, you know, the metaverse, and we're all going to be with the goggles, and
goggles are definitely involved in the metaverse.
We're going to be wearing the goggles and just sitting there and eating, you know, pretzels, and that's going to be our whole life.
You know, the Meta logo kind of looks pretzely. You know, I haven't seen it recently, but
it does, doesn't it?
It does. Chris, maybe that you made it an in the moment association. However, we are past 7. We need to give our official welcome to FUMFA 80, everyone. FUMFA 80.
80.
Meeting number 80. And we are welcoming tonight FUMFA alum Ellyn Gelman and special guest Janet Luango. They are both from the world of memoir and nonfiction. So we're really excited to hear from them tonight. It's not very frequently that we have like a double nonfiction night, Chris.
It's still true. We don't get a lot of memoir on it. We get some, but we haven't gotten, considering how, you know, popular memoir as a form is.
Totally.
I don't know. Maybe it's less so now, but I just remember a few years ago where it's, if you weren't writing a memoir, who, you know, what was the
even
point
are
of writing?
What are you even doing? No, that's so great. Well, we're excited to hear from them tonight. But Chris, before we get into tonight, tell our audience what is coming up soon.
Well, next week, which is the 30th of January, we have a double FUMFA night.
Woo!
Our friends Ana Maria Spagna and Emily Dillon will be joining us. And then the following week, we've got Patricia Dunn and Monica Ong. Monica, we discovered through the Connecticut, the most recent Connecticut literary anthology. And we're going to have several of those folks on in the coming weeks. And then on the 13th of February, of course, we have our Valentine's Day romance
night.
We're gonna have some spicy stuff going on, and maybe less spicy stuff going on, but romantic themed,
no less romantic,
poetry, stories, essays, what have you. And if anybody's interested in participating in that, please let us know.
Yes, please. We already have, I know everybody wants to know if Susan M. Davis and Midnight Philip J. Curtis are reading, and they are planning to Midnight. We're gonna figure something out because he'll be traveling, but we have them on the list, and very likely also Terry Rose Dirtson should be there as well. So so some spicy hits. The returning readers, and we have room for you. We have room for you too. Please let us know if you would like to join in that group reading for romance night.
We're going to have to just call it erotica night. It's just
we might. We're kind of egging them on in terms of the spice factor.
That's where we're headed. I'm gonna have to put in the red light bulb here.
Oh.
And that's going to be it.
It's gonna, make sure the kids are in bed, everyone. Make sure. All right. Well, we need to get started with our amazing readings for this evening with our guests, Ellyn Gelman and Janet Luongo. And we are going to welcome up first, Ellyn Gelman. Welcome, Ellyn.
Yes, she is.
Hi.
Ellyn, we're so happy to have you. We're so excited to hear you read.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I just want to tell my kids to take me off the text chat.
Oh, don't text me for the next 25 minutes.
Yeah, take me off Kiblets because it's ding, ding, dinging.
Oh, I
yeah.
hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Ellyn, let me share your bio with
Sure.
everyone. All right, Ellyn Gelman is a storyteller by nature. After raising 3 children, she earned an MFA in creative writing from Fairfield University. She teaches creative writing at Westport Writers Workshop in Connecticut. She loves to visit national parks. Her best adventures include dog sledding in Alaska and whitewater rafting down the Rio Grande. To read her work, visit her website, ellynkgelman.com. All right, take it away, Ellyn.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to read, I had an essay, which in Ireland they call short memoir, published in 2021. I didn't win the grand prize. I just made the top 10, so they published my essay. So tonight I'm just going to read this essay called Fissure. And yeah, thanks for showing up, everyone. I appreciate it. Fissure. He marked their fate with pink tape. The silvery underside of the maple leaves shimmered above us in the morning sun. I did not know the age of the trees. All I knew was that back in the spring of 1993, as my husband and I moved into our new home with our 9-month-old son, the maple trees were in full green and busy pitching their winged fruit seeds into the wind, onto our lawn, and covering the driveway. When my sister and I were children, she and I would toss the seeds up toward the sky and watch as they helicoptered their way down to the ground. Sometimes we split them in half and stuck them to our noses, pretending we had grown horns. On move-in day, I'd done the same with my baby boy. Look, I said, pointing at our reflection in the glass panes that framed our new front door. You're a baby rhino. Unimpressed, he pulled the horn off with his chubby little hand and tried to shove it in his mouth. 24 years later, I trailed behind the tree guy as he assessed the same silver maples. These two are dead, he said, stating the obvious. Stripped of their bark, their crowns had long ago been toppled. Their branches snapped off in sudden gusts of wind. Their lifeless trunks bore the scars of loss, rudimentary totem poles. I ran my hand over the smooth cambion as Tree Guy kicked at the roots of another maple. These 3 here won't be upright long, he said. They've grown too tall for their shallow roots. I suppose I won't miss their helicopter seeds, I said, feeling a strange sadness as he wrapped pink tape around the remaining maples. Nah, he said, they're a pain in the ass. Plant some nice dogwoods instead. I traveled to Oregon in the spring of 2017 for a writer's retreat. I joined 14 writers and 2 facilitators at a lodge 8 miles deep in a riparian forest in the Cascade Siskiyou Monument with no cell phone reception. The women, all strangers to me, sat in a tight circle made of well-worn couches, love seats, armchairs, and kitchen chairs. The cozy room smelled of coffee and musty furniture laced with a hint of perfume, and for the briefest moment, I was 7 years old again, sitting at the kitchen counter at my grandmother's house. The windows were open and everything, the air, the carpet, the green velvet chair I sank into, felt damp. Swollen with rain, Emigrant Creek could be heard pushing against its banks as it rushed to the valley. The rain had stopped, but water continued to drip from the leaves in a constant rhythm. We ranged in age from 25 to 85, but I suppose that most of the writers were in their 60s or 70s. Before introductions, one of the facilitators pulled a large futon into the center of our circle. I checked the faces of the other women, but none of them registered alarm. You're probably wondering what this is doing here, she said, as she knelt beside the futon. A few women, including me, nodded. This is where you'll come when you feel ready for body work. She went on to explain that the mind and body work together and how important it was to honor and be in touch with both. Feel free to come to the futon when you feel so moved, she continued. Or, if I recognize that one of you might benefit from some body work, I'll invite you to join me. I knew one thing. There was no way in hell I was going to lie on that futon in front of a bunch of strangers. I looked around the room again to try and determine what the criteria might be for body work. I uncrossed my legs and put my feet on the floor to show that I was connected to the earth, something I'd learned in therapy. I took a deep breath and relaxed my arms and shoulders. I stretched my neck from side to side, relieved by the satisfying crack in my spine. No body work needed here. When our son was 4 and our twins were 8 months old, my husband admitted to a 4-month-long affair. He and I had been together for 18 years, married for 12. I was gutted. His confession left me in a state of inarticulate confusion, with no sense of who we were or who we'd ever been. I tumbled into a dark place where only the musky, sweet smell of babies made sense. Away from my children, I existed in a silent, almost fugue-like state, where eventually I quit trying to make sense of what had happened. Instead, I focused on the vision I had cultivated for my little family, along with a skewed belief that divorce was a selfish act. My grandparents divorced in 1946 when my mother was only 8 years old. The shame she carried as a child from a broken family became part of her DNA, and her shame was born in me. I chose to stay. The tree guy, having finished marking the maples, made his way to the ornamental cherry tree near the front porch. A dogwood would look nice here too. I looked up at the arthritic branches. The cherry tree was beautiful for roughly 10 days in the spring, when its tight, dark buds exploded into pink flowers. It had been the perfect curb appeal for a young couple in search of their first home. For the past 5 years, a pair of robins had nested in that tree. Robins are territorial by nature, and the male, whom I named Bob, spent a good portion of his day attacking his reflection in the living room window. He flew back and forth from branch to window, pecking at the glass, puffing his chest, and beating the window with his wings. When he returned to the tree, exhausted from battle, he looked deranged. This went on for weeks with such a ferocity that I worried, and sometimes hoped, I'd find his lifeless body in the garden beneath the tree. The internet suggested I cover the window on the outside with a painter's cloth, a suggestion which was a hard no for me. Despite Bob's persistent fight over what he believed belonged only to him. On the second night of the retreat, we were given a one-word prompt: roots. We had 15 minutes to put thoughts to paper. I managed to scribble a paragraph about my army brat childhood. As the first volunteer read her 4 pages, using a taproot as a metaphor, one of the women made her way to the futon. I was used to this ritual by then, the soft touch of the facilitator as she isolated muscles and pulled at the tension. I kept my eyes on her hands until it was time for me to read. By the age of 13, I read, she had learned to keep her roots shallow. Before then, she had allowed them to tunnel deep into each new place, but the pain of uprooting was more than she could bear. The tearing, the breaking, the ripping. Each time her family moved, she was forced to adapt to a different soil, a different climate. Sometimes her roots remained dormant, taking nourishment from the air instead of the ground that had been soaked with the blood of mothers, sons, and still bore the stink of war. Although she was exposed to frequent storms of chaos, she still preferred to keep her roots shallow. That night, alone in my room, I lay fully clothed on the bed and studied the canopy made of limbs from a birch tree. The limbs had been bent and twisted to form not only the canopy, but a headboard and footboard as well. I wondered what it took for those branches to succumb to another's vision of what they should be. How many had split in the process? My husband had deep roots. He couldn't wait to move back to his hometown in Connecticut where our first son was born, when our first son was born. All three of our children graduated from his high school. Everywhere we went in town, driving past certain houses or walking by the pavilion at the beach, he would tell stories about high school and the parties he'd attended. He lamented over a drive-in burger joint that was now a McDonald's, a record store that had opened in the 70s that had become a jewelry store, and the Pink bookstore, which had been muted gray by Talbot's. On the last full day of the retreat, I wandered among the big leaf maples and Oregon ash trees, hoping I might find answers in the solitude of the forest. My core identity as a full-time mother had not been challenged for a quarter of a century. And although I was grateful for the adults my children had become, their father and I had no more dreams in common. I was restless and anxious to know what life looked like going forward. The humidity made it feel hotter than the alleged 70 degrees, so after a while I sat down on an uprooted tree, which despite its death, continued to play an important role in the forest. I picked up a branch on the ground and drew circles in the dirt. I hummed a song by The Clash, and then, perhaps because I was alone among the trees, I stood, turned my face toward the sun, and sang the chorus over and over and over. Should I stay or should I go now? I tossed the branch aside and sat back down, and in the sweaty silence that followed, I felt better than I had in a long time. On the last night of the retreat, we were given a small piece of paper and told to write down a number from 1 to 85. I quickly wrote my age, 56, and began to brainstorm what I would write about. Maybe singing in the woods, I thought, until we were instructed to pass our number to the left. We were given 20 minutes to write about our new number. Mine was 76. After 10 minutes of nothing, I decided to write a letter from my 76-year-old self. Dear 56, here's the good news. The racist, misogynistic POTUS number 45 received a life sentence. 4 of the last 5 presidents have been women, as is 50% of the cabinet, Senate, and Congress. You survived the gauntlet of menopause and refrained from lashing out at women who said things like, I only had 1, maybe 2 hot flashes that I can remember. The hardware in your cervical and lumbar spine looks as good now as the day they were pounded into your bones and closed with 36 staples. The MRI app on your phone will confirm this. The loud, knocking metal casket you slid into every 4 years or so has become a museum piece. You did the right thing when you followed your dream and moved to New York City. The rest was up to him. Your daughter received the Nobel Peace Prize for designing a weapon that is disabled when turned on the innocent. A mutation in your DNA allowed you to escape the frontal lobe dementia that claimed your grandmother and your father. You will never regret getting a breast reduction. You will smell babies again. Finally, know that you may have to be split wide open in order to fly away. With great love, 76. By the time I read aloud, you will smell babies again, I was choked up and blinking back tears. The facilitator opened her arms as I made my way to the futon. I was taught growing up never to say never. For 35 years, my dream to one day live in Manhattan had only grown stronger. After a day at a museum or a night at the theater, I would stare out the car window on the passenger side and seek out the lit windows in the high-rise apartment buildings along the West Side Highway. I'd imagine myself living there, curled up with a book or looking out over the Hudson River at sunset with a glass of wine. As we passed the George Washington Bridge, I'd bring up living in New York with my husband. Our conversations always went something like this. The ride home is such a buzzkill, I'd say. Wouldn't you like to just walk home after dinner or a play, ride the subway home from the village? We could have booked a hotel, he'd say. It's not the same. I want to live here. Not wanting to end the evening in an argument, we would spend the rest of the hour-long ride home in silence. A few weeks after I returned from Oregon and the dogwoods my husband had chosen with a landscaper were in full bloom, I brought up moving to New York City. Now is the time to go, I said. The kids are out in the world on their own. I flung my arms wide for emphasis. Let's sell the house or rent it out, whatever. You'll have a shorter commute. Let's get out of here. He leaned forward from the back of the couch, clasped his hands together, and looked me straight in the eye. Ellyn, he said, I am never moving to New York City. I sat back in the black leather chair, both unnerved and galvanized by the clarity of his words. I looked away from the eyes I'd known for 40 years and searched the bookcase behind his head until I found The Spine of Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed. I had highlighted many sentences and passages in her book, but the one I remembered in that moment was wanting to leave is enough. I moved to New York City at the end of August, and there were very few mornings when I didn't wake to the magic of disbelief. Good morning, New York City, I said as I stretched in front of the eastern skyline. The only thing I missed in my apartment on West 52nd Street was the sound of rain on the roof. Only those that afforded a 24-floor penthouse had that privilege. There were no maple trees on my block in Hell's Kitchen, but both sides of the street were lined with trees. I recognized only the red oaks and pin oaks. One rainy morning, while searching the internet, I found a New York City tree map. It listed every tree in the city and its closest address. I learned that the trees on my block were Japanese pagoda trees, thornless honey locusts, calorie pear, and Japanese zelkovas. As I slowly became a New Yorker, I thought less about trees and more about how to get around on the subway and buses. In autumn, my block exploded with color. The pin oaks waved their scarlet red leaves beside the bright orange of the Japanese zelkovas. The thornless honey locusts burst into various shades of yellow, and at the end of the street, the pear tree turned a deep shade of purple. Only the deep-rooted Japanese pagoda trees refused to change. Their leaves, green until the winds in November tossed them to the ground. The next summer, divorce proceedings began. 2 years later, I photographed an uprooted silver maple tree that had been felled by a storm. Judging by the swath of land it tore from the ground, it did not go without a fight. The roots were the size of small tree trunks, and the thin feeder roots had dried and withered. Back at my apartment, I selected the photograph of the uprooted maples and made it the background on my laptop, then searched for ways to determine the age of a tree. There were various options, but the one I preferred was a mathematical equation. I returned the following day to measure the stump. With my iPhone, I divided the stump's circumference of 102 inches by 3.14 pi to get the radius, and then multiplied the quotient by the growth factor, which was 3 for silver maples. 96 years old. There were 3 separate sets of rings on the stump. An outer ring that had morphed into 2 separate rings divided by a deep fissure. At some point in its life, the old tree had suffered a trauma, an event consequential enough to divide it in two. I ran my fingertips over the rough edges of the fissure. I imagined how the new trunk must have grown more and more distant from the first, creating its own leafy crown as it reached toward the sun. Thank you.
Ellyn! Oh my God! Ellyn, you got me crying over here. Absolutely gorgeous and
Thank
powerful
you.
and
Thanks,
beautiful. Oh,
Thank you,
Chris.
Kate.
No, that was gorgeous. I need
Totally.
that futon because I'm right. I mean, it's very it's emotionally wrenching.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But
yeah,
and yet triumphant at the same time. And isn't
absolutely.
life just like that, you know?
Absolutely. We're gonna have some good questions for the Q&A.
We absolutely will. Ellyn, that was
Really
so rich with emotion and imagery and what and how you were able to kind of tell us this whole huge shift in your life in such beautiful words that we could so vividly see and imagine. And I guess we can just cheer for you for living that dream. Wow.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we are very excited to ask you questions in the Q&A. So everybody, get those questions in the chat in time for 8 o'clock, when we will have our Q&A with both of our readers for tonight, of course. So save up your questions for Ellyn. We are going to move to our second reader of the evening. Thank you so much, Ellyn Gelman.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Our pleasure.
All right. Well, we need to welcome up Janet Luongo. Welcome, Janet. Oops.
There she is.
Hi, how are you?
Welcome, Janet. Welcome.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you doing this evening?
I am feeling good. Yeah, very
Fabulous.
excited.
We are so excited to have you. Chris, will you share Janet's bio with us?
Of course. I'm happy to do that. Okay, Janet's book, Rebellion, 1967, a memoir, was published by She Writes Press in July of last year, 2021, and reviewed in Hearst newspapers in Connecticut. Janet has published several essays and interviews in national magazines. She creates stories and art, gives speeches, readings, and workshops, and works for racial and gender justice.
Awesome.
What's that?
I said awesome. I was just cheering for Janet.
Anna Cord Creek Books published her first book, 365 Daily Affirmations for Creativity, with a foreword by Jack Canfield, in 5 countries, which led to engagements as far away as China. She led the New York Metro chapter of the National Speakers Association and founded a nonprofit for feminist artists in Connecticut, a chapter of Women's Caucus for Art, and in 15 years, they mounted 40 exhibits and produced Women Make Art, a film that screened in the Quick Center, of course, at Fairfield University, and at UFM Festival. Born in New York City, Janet earned a master's in art education from Queens College at CUNY. She lives in Switzerland. She lived in Switzerland. She's not living there right this minute, in Switzerland, where she exhibited paintings in Geneva and Paris. Moving to Connecticut, she designed diversity programs for underserved children at museums in Bridgeport and taught at HCC and NCC. She taught art and art history, K through 12, and at Sacred Heart University, where she also taught public speaking. She currently serves as a leader for voting rights and a lay minister for the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Westport, who honored her as a leading light in 2020. She resides in Norwalk.
Come on, Janet.
Norwalk with her husband Jim and their kitty cat Lucky, and they enjoy hiking with their son and family, not just anywhere, but the Rockies. So
yeah.
We listen.
There you
so
go.
much to ask about in the Q&A, even before your reading, Janet. What an incredible life!
Yeah.
We're so excited to have you.
Thank you.
I feel like a little bit of a loser, but anyway.
Oh,
Go for it, Janet.
Take it away.
Okay, so my story is dedicated to my family. I wrote this memoir, and it's dedicated especially to girls who face obstacles and oppression. And the memoir is unusual, and it's just 1 year of the summer of 1966 to the summer of 1967. And I cover 3 themes in my book. One is coming of age, growing up, and then there was family, which was broken and confusing, and the society of the 1960s, which of course a lot of people love to hear about and probably fantasize a little bit about, romanticize. It was the time of civil rights, we know, and so my focus tonight in my readings that I selected are about Martin Luther King, who meant so much to me and still does. And I had heard him speak that year and marched with him in 1967. So just a few days after Martin Luther King Day, I wanted to speak about him. That was a time of racial reckoning similar to what we're going through in our country today. And today, Black people, as I understand it, are asking white people like me to reflect on how we grew up and what we heard about people who were other than us, not only race, but other ways. But socializing children is normal. We have to be socialized to some degree so that we can navigate in society. But we forget how we learn certain things that our parents or teachers told us. So my father was way ahead of his time, I think, because he was doing that work then. He realized, he admitted and acknowledged that his parents, his Irish parents, had been quite bigoted. And he realized they were, he used to use the word prejudiced and prejudging he thought was wrong and stupid, because how can you know what they're like if you've decided before you meet them. And so he had to catch himself, because he said, I've been poisoned by these ideas. He knew they were wrong, and he did the work, and he would try to stop himself when he realized he had a false assumption. And he, mostly importantly for me, is he decided intentionally to not train his little girls, to teach his little girls, I had 2 sisters, to be prejudiced. So that for that I'm forever grateful. He also had a downside. Nobody's perfect. We show flawed characters. That makes for good stories. He was an alcoholic and divorced from my mother in the spring of 1966. My story goes from 1966, the summer, until the summer of 1967. So my parents were divorced. Immediately after they were divorced, my mother remarried, moved the family out of New York City, which I loved. I was in Queens. And then she moved my younger sister and I, still at home, to New Jersey. And that summer, that marriage lasted only for the summer. So my story begins, the opening of the story is that's fall 1966, when I was age 17 and I was starting college at City University of New York. We moved back to Jamaica, Queens, to reconcile with my father. My mother wanted to reconcile with my dad. And they set my little sister and me, age 16, up in an apartment in the same building. And I commuted to college on the Upper West Side of New York. And I felt neglected working by my family, and they hardly saw us. And the story is mostly about the comfort I found, the purpose I found working for civil rights, and the comfort I had in several relationships with Black people. So one was mural painter Bill, and that was, I had been working with him, and I had relief there painting pictures. It was really wonderful. My focus, though, is more on my friend Rudy, who was my friend from senior year in high school. He was in my homeroom. We just got to know each other. We'd walk down to the bus together. And then he introduced me to a fellow named Stan, who was a community activist in the Jamaica, the south part of Jamaica, which was the Black ghetto, literally divided by the railroad tracks, I discovered. And then Doc was the first Black neurosurgeon in America. And then there was a boyfriend that I won't read about, but you can read about in my book. So this first excerpt is from fall of 1965. And This is a flashback to earlier. Sorry, this is a flashback to fall of 1965 with Rudy. We were sitting on a park bench on our way home down to the bus. And as we were sitting on the bench in the park by a pond, Rudy's eyes landed squarely at an equal button that I had pinned on my jacket. It was simply a white equal sign in a black circle, and he said to me, "Do you really think it's true?" "What?" "That blacks and whites are equal." How could Rudy question that? Astonished, I sputtered that equality was a self-evident truth, as Thomas Jefferson put it. He looked away and said, "You know, in all my years in school, we've never studied one accomplished black person, not one." I pondered, but only came up with Frederick Douglass. He said, "If we study only one black person, maybe no one else is worth studying." I realized something. Except for a poem or two by Emily Dickinson, women are left out of the curriculum too, I said. "You don't ask if women are equal to men." "Well, that's because they're not equal," he joked. I poked him. It wasn't a good joke. As a female, I fiercely wanted to be free and equal. So the next excerpt is a month later, in October 1965, in Harlem. One Saturday soon after Rudy accompanied me and my Unitarian youth group to Harlem to tutor junior high kids. When he walked me home, my dad invited him in for a Coke. Dad always loved discussing issues. And he asked us about Harlem. I said, "Oh, the kids wanted to go to the Metropolitan Museum." Dad thought it was good that the kids got out of their neighborhood. He talked about his experience in Bedford-Stuyvesant, a slum in Brooklyn. "I saw schools so overcrowded and run down. It's no wonder the kids can't read." He agreed that Negroes deserved a fair shake. I watched Rudy's face as Dad shared his observations. Landlords there don't maintain buildings. Men who can't find unemployment because they're discriminated against, well, they hang out on the streets. They're in despair, which unfortunately leads to drug and alcohol. Ignorance prevails. Dad described an incident. A girl got hit by a car. She wasn't badly hurt. Still, Dad said, I had to write a police report. At the word police, Rudy bit his lip. Rudy, holding his body stiff, nodded politely and stood to leave. I followed him into the hall outside our apartment. He said, "Is your father a cop?" I told him he was now a lieutenant in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn. Rudy chided me. "Why didn't you tell me your father was a cop?" Oh, you can see he's liberal. I wasn't hiding it. I just didn't think his job mattered." He looked at me in wide-eyed disbelief. I then learned how police, even the word, could trigger visceral fear in Black men. "Of course, you're right," I said. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you before." So now I'm back. This is now in September 66, at the start of my memoir, where the book begins. And I just was reading flashbacks. But this is now, we're in Jamaica after coming back to New York City, where my mother wants to reconcile with my dad. So I went to see Rudy to tell him I'm home, and the bus wheezed into the terminal and braked, rain pounding down. I spotted Rudy beaming and holding an umbrella, and I ducked underneath. He said, "Let's try off in a coffee shop." I took his arm, noticing he seemed much thinner and walked with a limp. I asked, "Is your leg okay?" "Yeah," he said, "I'm glad you're back." He told me he was doing exciting work in Jamaica with this community activist named Stan, who started Freedom Place for youth. He supported Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for pushing President Johnson to get the Voting Rights Act passed and to launch the Great Society and War on Poverty. Washington is hot on pumping money into the ghetto. Stan got a gang of us together. You'd like him. You could A cop in rain gear stood in front of us, his feet planted wide. He glowered and smacked his nightstick in his gloved hands. Rudy whispered, "Let's drop arms." Though afraid, I held on tighter, defiantly. Tense, we walked gingerly past the cop. He followed us. Rudy and I ran and ducked into the coffee shop, slid into a booth, and caught our breath. "What just happened?" I asked. That cop's scaring us? His job is to keep us safe. "Your father taught you that?" Rudy asked. I said yes. A smile flickered on his lips, and I asked what he was thinking. "Janet, every TV show, Western, crime show, even the news teaches us that cops are good guys going after bad guys." I waited for his point. He said, "That cop saw me as a bad guy." "Why? That's outrageous." He shrugged. "Don't worry. I'm used to cops assuming I'm a criminal." I said, "Rudy, you're one of the most gentle people I know." He stood to go to his apartment to keep his appointment with Stan. He insisted I meet him in Rudy's family apartment. Rudy said he desperately needed the student deferment. "The military is on my tail. Recruiters need us black boys to be grunts on the front line. But I can't pick up a gun and shoot poor peasants who never hurt me or attack my country." I agreed that the Vietnam War was horribly immoral. He said, "I've been called for a physical." I gasped. He said, "But they don't take you if you're underweight." Oh, I thought, that's why he's so thin. "If starvation doesn't work," he said, "I'll try." Rudy lifted his pant legs to show his ankle. He pulled back a bandage to expose raw red skin and a raging wound oozing with pus. I covered my mouth to keep from gagging. Rudy picked up a carving knife from the drain. When the draft board called me for a physical, I cut my ankle. Every day, I pour dirty dishwasher over it to infect it. "Rudy, you could lose your foot." "I don't have enough money to pay a psychiatrist to say I'm crazy. I can't get to Canada, and I don't want to go to jail." I felt sickened by the predicament guys in my generation had to deal with, especially young black men like Rudy. He said, "I know I could lose my foot, but I gotta stand up for myself. I'll fight for freedom, but not in some hellish jungle, but right here at home in South Jamaica, where I don't have to kill or maim anyone." "But Rudy, you're maiming yourself." Stan appeared. He looked at me and his eyes flashed as if surprised to find Rudy with a white girl. Likewise, I didn't expect him to be so striking, handsome as a movie star with tight curls falling over his forehead. He looked like Black Tony Curtis. Seeming to be in his 30s, he stood straight, dressed in casual slacks and orange sweatshirt. Rudy told Stan a bit about me, and Stan's eyebrows lifted. He said, "Miss Duffy, pleased to meet you." In a formal but charming way, "Our community can use the talents of an artist and college student like you." Stan asked why I felt committed to civil rights. "Reverend Martin Luther King," I said. He asked to hear more. I took a breath and my mind flew back 3 years to watching on TV the March on Washington, D.C. I related how at age 14 I felt mesmerized by King's passionate speech, "I have a dream." My blood pumped through me so fiercely I wished I could jump out of my skin and fly bodily to D.C. Feeling Stan's smiling brown eyes upon me, I again noticed my blood pumping. He said softly, "So you like Brother Martin's dream for his sons to be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character?" I nodded. He said, "Then you probably don't want to miss our next community meeting here in Jamaica. Can we count on you to come on Friday?" I couldn't resist joining Freedom Place. So this Freedom Place was in the Black Ghetto of South Jamaica. Stan assumed because my name was Duffy that I was Irish, true, and Catholic, not so. My father had left Catholicism to raise his 3 girls, Unitarian Universalist. Stan had never heard of this religion. I told him that in Sunday school, we learned about the teachings of Jesus as well as Buddha and other wise thinkers like Mahatma Gandhi who won a war through nonviolence. I love our principles: love, peace, justice, democracy. We call ourselves seekers of the truth, I said. We're free to question and think for ourselves. Oh, that explains a lot about you, Duffy, he said as he sat back and smiled broadly. Your father bucked tradition. Exactly, I said. He also rebelled against his family prejudice. He wouldn't teach his girls to hate. Stan asked what he did teach us. I remembered him taking the family to the movie South Pacific. Afterwards, Dad played the soundtrack and wanted us to learn the song. They have to be carefully taught. Children will play with any kid who's fun, I thought. Fear of different colors has to be drummed into them. Stan asked if fear was drummed into me at school. I thought. My mind reeled back to 3rd grade. I told Stan about my teacher, Mrs. Rousson. She was the first Black person I ever met. In fact, the only Black person in my elementary school. Our class was accelerated, but she had time to talk to us about Rosa Parks and the Montgomery boycott. We kids knew it wasn't fair to force people to the back of the bus. Oh, good to hear little white folks have some sense. His tone in saying white folks sounded like a gentle tease. Yes, Stan, and she told us little white folks to dream, to believe anything is possible. Since then, I told Stan, I believe if I can dream it, I can do it. I love Mrs. Rousson. I felt so proud when she rose up, my teacher looking like a star in the school assemblies, like Mahalia Jackson. I cried when she belted out, America the Beautiful. God crown thy good with brotherhood. So now we jump a bit to the November of 1966, about a month later. One Sunday, a local doctor offered free health exams for poor folks at Freedom Place, and Rudy passed on Stan's request for my assistance. I readily showed up, and Stan said he hoped to bring in the locals. I asked why the doctor wasn't giving the exams at the hospital. Stan said, these folks, even if half dead, would rather suffer from disease than venture into that scary, spanking white hospital building. Stan said everyone in the neighborhood trusted Stan, so the doctor asked Stan to host the clinic. Volunteers like me had hung posters at the shelter, unemployment center, and welfare office, and SOC, short for Socrates, one of the guys in Stan's gang, posted 2 signs at Lou's liquor store. A man with a mustache appeared wearing spectacles, a raincoat, and a furry Russian-style hat. Stan announced the doctor had arrived. I caught myself surprised that this Black man was a doctor, realizing that for my whole life, the only doctors I had ever met or saw on TV were white men. Stan introduced us to one of the first Black neurosurgeons in America and the new director of Interfaith Hospital in Jamaica. Today, he's here to help the helpless. Welcome, Dr. Matthew. Thank you. Call me Doc. What's up, Doc? Socrates cracked, and we all laughed. Doc thanked us for reaching out to folks who struggle with alcoholism, a disease and a slow killer. I had heard similar words at an AA meeting I'd attended with Dad and hoped Dad would sober up before it was too late. Doc said, if the ghetto folk won't go to the hospital will come to the ghetto. We cheered. He removed his hat, exposed his shiny head, bald on top with tufts of dark hair on the temples. This dude is like howdy doody, Doc whispered. Funny, but I elbowed him to cut the jokes. We all pitched in to put up chairs and screens, set up the registration table, make sandwiches, and Doc stood ready in a white medical coat. But no one showed up, and we worried the bologna sandwiches would dry up. Stan ducked out. After an hour, Stan popped in the door saying, the guys are coming. Doc asked how he attracted them. Stan said, I just put the word out, they get it free. Doc asked, they didn't know the exam is free? Not the exam, the wine. The gang laughed while Stan stacked large Gallo wine bottles on the table, and we went out to welcome the men. Most stood across the parking lot. Others leaned against the stucco building. I was repelled by the stink of alcohol, but Stan greeted each man by name. The day was damp and unseasonably cold for October, and even in my fleece-lined jacket, I shivered. I asked Stan how the men with no jackets at all could stand the cold. With that much alcohol in you, you become oblivious, he said. They're a hardy bunch. They can endure temperatures and conditions way beyond my tolerance. Finally, a man with a deep cut on his forehead asked Stan, "True, you got free wine?" Stan said, "Fred, ever know me to tell you a lie?" The men chuckled and mumbled, "Stan, no, he tells no lies." Fred stepped inside. Two followed him. They ignored the bologna sandwiches, but reached immediately for the wine. Vicky pulled the Gallo bottle back. She told them after the exam they'd get a cup of wine. Fred grumbled that he didn't want no damn exam and turned right around. But he couldn't get past Stan, who said, "Come on now, Fred, you got a nasty cut there. Doc will fix you right up. Go with Duffy there. She'll get you started." I smiled at Fred and held his arm, and he stumbled up the step to the back room. We sat down at the table, and I picked up an intake form. "Okay, I got your first name, Fred. What's your last name?" "Don't like giving out no information." "I hate official forms too," I said, "but only Doc will see this, not the government. Not the police neither. Definitely not the police." He told me I was pretty. I smiled and asked for his address. He said he forgot it. Of course, I figured he must be homeless. I asked if he was married, and he said, "The woman ran out on me." I asked about children, and he said he had a couple here and there. His buddies chuckled. "Place of birth?" He said, "Never been nowhere else but here." I thanked him and directed him to Doc. Fred asked, "What's he going to do?" "Just check eyes, heart, throat," I assured him, "and look at your cut." Fred admitted it did hurt and moved to the table, covered in sanitized white paper, where Doc sat him down and pulled the curtain closed. After several minutes, Fred came out smiling, sporting a fresh white bandage on his head. "Ready for my wine now." I said, "Okay, just one last thing. Please sign your form." Fred stopped dead in his tracks. He took the big pen into his fist and exhaled loudly as he deliberately marked an X. Oh my God. It was the first time in my life I'd ever met anyone who couldn't write his own name. Illiteracy should not exist in America. Somehow our education system had failed him. Fred hung his head and peeked at me with sad eyes, his jaws sliding back and forth across decaying teeth. I luckily remembered a fact of history. "That's okay, Fred," I said. "You know, the French King Charlemagne, he signed his name with an X too." Fred's face lit up and he stood up. He said, "If an X was good enough for a king, it's good enough for me." He slugged some wine, then went forth to spread the word to his buddies. I felt a deep satisfaction here that I had not felt at college, of being part of something bigger than me, bigger than my own ambitions. Doc and the gang celebrated, and I picked up a cup of wine too. Stan looked at me askance. Not yet 18, I was not legally allowed to drink. I lowered the cup, but as soon as he turned, I lifted it up and toasted him behind his back, making Moody and Sock crack up. So a little bit later, this is now March, and now I am working for Doc. I've joined the hospital. I quit my job and worked with Doc at the Interfaith Hospital. And I found that Stan was becoming suspicious of Doc because he didn't trust his ideology anymore. He said at one point, whereas I was very enamored of Doc, his beliefs, his structure, his hospital. And I had just started work with him that day. And I said, "I believe in Doc." Just today, he and his wife laid out their vision to help poor people, and I'm honored to be working for them. Stan was surprised I worked for the Doc, and he started to tell me I should be careful. And I did not understand why. I met Stan in a library where he was looking up documents, and I really didn't understand this at all, so I left to catch my bus. Stan followed me out of the library into the black night where wet snowflakes hit my face. He turned the ignition, set the heat to high. "Look," I said, "I thought that you and Doc were working together." Stan assured me they both did share the goal of improving the Black community, but he tried to figure out why Doc would accept the city's money to take in welfare patients, but claims he's against welfare. That did seem contradictory, I thought. Oh, so it got very confusing, but we talked, and then Stan said, "What if I told you that Doc is against the Great Society?" Which is something that Stan and I had been working for Martin Luther King. "I'd say you were mistaken, I'd say. Can you please start the car? Check this out first." He showed me a document, an interview where Doc doesn't believe in welfare type relief and called the anti-poverty program an extended form of home relief. I felt stunned. With struggle and conflict all around me, Doc's vision of prosperity and order gave me hope. I grabbed the door handle. I'll catch the bus. I'm going to move a little quickly past some things here. Okay. So this is the shocking part, that here I like these and admire these two men so much, Stan and Doc, and now there's this tension between them. And then Doc announced to the staff that he got a bus for Martin Luther King to hear him speak at the Riverside Church in New York City, April 4th, 1967. So I felt so excited remembering hearing King's speech on TV. And now I was going to hear Martin Luther King in person. I was so excited. And I said, clearly, I said to myself, Stan had been mistaken about Doc opposing Dr. King's policies. The doc asked me to draw some pictures. He wanted me to draw pictures about Martin Luther King and how wrong it was that Dr. King was opposing the war in Vietnam. Now, I opposed the war in Vietnam, and I thought he had good reason to oppose it, and I didn't want to draw any negative pictures of my idol, Dr. Martin Luther King. So it was my boss giving me an order to do a cartoon that was negative about King, and then I recalled Stan's advice to be careful, and I believed I didn't know exactly what to do. So I did some general things, just showing Doc, saying, Negroes need jobs and housing. That's what they called themselves then, some Black people, Negroes. Now, the day of King's speech, which he called Beyond Vietnam, Rudy, my friend, invited me to join the gang on the bus that Stan had arranged to go hear Dr. King in Manhattan. I yearned to join them, but it was too late. Doc ushered me along with his staff onto their van. We rolled past the steaming waters of the Hudson River, and the sight of the gloriously lit Riverside Church rising above us took my breath away. Doc opened the van rear doors and called to us, "There's a picket sign for each of you." Horrified, I saw he had added anti-King messages. I did not take one. I stood fixed on the sidewalk as Doc lined up his staff along the walls of the church. Across the street, handfuls of other fringe groups were protesting King, each periodically chanting slogans, "Bomb Hanoi," "Segregation forever." In contrast to the angry chants, shouts of laughter arose from the corner near the front of Riverside Church. Large Black women in choir robes burst into song. "Down by the riverside, gonna lay down my sword and shield. Down by the riverside." Hundreds of people, white and Black, young and old, streamed into the church. Then I spotted Rudy, Sock, and the gang, and Stan, who caught my eye. We walked closer to each other. Stan said, smiling, "Are you coming in?" "I want to," I said. He assessed the scene unfolding behind me, a reporter with Doc, picketing nurses, walking in a dumb circle. Stan's face showed disbelief. "Doc is here to protest against Martin Luther King?" He turned to me. "What are you going to do, Miss Duffy?" My face flushed with embarrassment. I'd been pushed into acting against my belief, exactly what Stan had warned me against. I said, "I want to listen to King." "Well, let's go then." Sock and Rudy beckoned us from the corner, and Stan waved and started walking to them. I lagged behind. He turned back to me with a questioning look. When I said nothing, disappointment crossed his eyes, and he continued walking. My eyes glued to the back of his long gray coat. I watched him recede. I yearned to follow, but couldn't move. I saw Stan meet up with the others, send me a quick backward glance, then merge into the spirited crowd entering the church. My heart fell hollow. Rudy suddenly popped up. He came running for me. Hurry, Duffy, this is history. You can't miss this. I stood there thinking, if I leave Doc's group, I'll lose my job. If I don't join Dr. King, I'll lose my soul. I raced with Rudy up the steps, up Riverside Church. By the time we entered, though, the pews inside were so packed, not even standing room remained. We squeezed into a spot on a stone bench in the foyer where we heard Dr. King's voice piked in. His words resonated in my soul as he spoke from his heart, and the themes provoked associations. Dr. King stood firm in his belief that the issues of peace and civil rights are connected, a belief I shared, having been taught by Unitarian Universalist faith to respect the interrelatedness of all things. He spoke of how the poverty programs had aroused hope, which I myself felt while working with the South Jamaica community at Freedom Place. Social progress stalled when the Vietnam War sucked up the nation's resources. Black and white soldiers fighting together in Vietnam reminded me of Stan and his white buddy Pete, who watched each other's backs in Korea. At home in America, faced strict segregation. Why is integration so hard for some to accept? I wondered, as Rudy and I sat side by side in the church, just as we had as classmates. King talked about angry young men who doubted his path of nonviolent protests. I thought of Clarence, a fellow there who frightened me at Freedom Place, who seemed to advocate riots. I better understood now that Clarence himself felt frightened by the violence all about, unchecked police abuse and the threat of the draft closing in, and he wanted to fight back. Clarence chose to join the war as a Green Beret. I worried that under cover of the American flag, he might do harm to innocents. And the violence continued daily. King reported 1 million Vietnamese killed, mostly children, a disgrace so appalling that Rudy had poured dirty dishwasher on his self-inflicted wound to avoid recruitment into an army where he could be ordered to kill peasants, while destruction of villages ripped families apart. In Vietnam, the conflicts over the war divided families in every state of America. King's shocking perspective of America as a violent nation vibrated in booming speakers. What's happening to my country, I wondered. Are we losing our soul? His words of spiritual truth filled me with life. I felt alive here with my hero in the same church, breathing the same air. Dr. King called for the world to move beyond the tribes of race and class. He called for nothing less than unconditional love, a force of unity. Unitarians stand for unity, I thought. We follow Reverend Martin Luther King because he embraces our deepest values of justice and love. We believed his words that we could move from discord to a symphony of brotherhood. I remembered my beloved teacher, Mrs. Roussan, inspired me with her passionate rendition of God Bless America. Americans had to choose change and look toward the day when justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Those closing words King chose from the Bible washed over us in waves, and Rudy and I, arms interlocked, found our cheeks wet. Oh, and that's my excerpts.
Janet! What incredible memories, what an incredible life you've had. I'm like, wow. Totally riveted, Janet. That was absolutely incredible. And what, awesome opportunities you have. And I just wrote it down here, that question, what are you going to do? And it was just incredible to see in these different moments how you stood by your friends and made hard choices and got to see Martin Luther King speak. Absolutely incredible, Janet. Thank you so much for sharing all that. I'm so involved now. This is in your book, right?
Yes.
All right, everybody go get it.
Wow. This slice of history that you were so, deeply a part of, it's so much. I mean, it's not only, you know, moving and meaningful, but it's also like really entertaining. I mean, just like all
Yes.
these characters, these characters that you meet and the stories that you tell, and just, you know, it's just fantastic.
And
Great.
what an incredible history, you know, that you know that you lived through, that you were present for, that you were making your own realizations, and that is such a powerful and important history, such an important, you know, document for us as we still, you know, go through, you know, kind of some of the same. I mean, all of the same exact issues, you know, in present day. Janet, that's so important. And that's so awesome. Thank you so much, Janet.
Thank you for your feedback. That's wonderful. You really
Oh
get
my
it.
God. Both you and Ellyn need to go on social media. Remember, we're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and just see the comments in the chat from
Oh.
people. Just, I mean, during much of your reading, it was like silent, right? Like people were just totally riveted. And you know, I think everyone will be excited to ask both of you questions. You know, we started off the new year. Hey, Ellyn. We started off the new year with these fabulous group readings, and last week we had about 10 readers, amazing poets back to back. But it's so great to get back to our feature readings, where each reader really has that time, that 25 minutes, where you can really share a whole piece or really get into your work. And listening to both of you, I really was taken to both of your worlds. Just incredibly powerful, visceral, beautiful experiences. What a treat, right, Chris?
We were swept up.
Will we be able to see the later on? We'll be able to see on Facebook the comments.
Oh,
Yes.
sure, yeah. If you
On
go
YouTube as well, also Twitter, and the video is archived there always. So if you have friends or family who weren't able to see this tonight, or even future friends that you may meet, you can share this, you can post
Yeah,
this, you can
that's
post
great.
embed it on your website as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, we got to get to the questions here.
We do.
we can ask. I mean, it's great that we have two nonfiction memoir pieces, and so different. You know,
Yes.
just stylistically very different, and yet many similarities. We'll probably talk about
So
that.
powerful, so personal, so poignant. These different levels of realization, these different moments of, you know, kind of joy, yet also tension. We always find a very interesting synergy between our readers for the night, whether we meticulously plan a pair or whether two people are available on the same night. We find fascinating resonances. We love it. So everybody put your questions in the chat. We're going to get started with our famous first question. Chris?
Famous or infamous, depending on how you want to look at it. But
yeah.
We're on opposite sides, Katie. You know.
I know this is weird. I'm feeling weird. I'm pointing all the wrong ways.
So yes, first question. We'll start with Ellyn, and then we'll go to Janet. How it's very simple, and yet possibly profound. How has writing changed your life? Take it away, Ellyn.
Go, Ellyn.
Well, it's definitely increased vulnerability hangovers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that term.
I think,
talk a little bit about that too, even before we go on.
well, I think writing memoir, like scraping at your guts is hard. I think not so hard when you're alone in a room. I think putting it out in the world, and anything that I've ever gotten published, when I got the letter that said, we're going to publish your story, I want to bring it right back home. I want to take it.
Right.
So I think that's, you know, and I've dabbled with like thinly veiled fiction, which just doesn't ever work for me because I'm not a fiction writer. So
it's so interesting. Yeah. Let's talk about that too.
Yeah, I think writing for me, I think I was really naive when I went to the MFA program, and I was just going to write stories and true stories. And, I think writing true stories well told is, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
and then, when you're writing about the people that you love the most, I think that's always gut wrenching. And
Yeah.
whenever I write about my children, I think I have twins who are 25 and a son and daughter-in-law who are 29. And whenever I write about them, they get to see it before I ever see
Yeah.
That's smart. That's smart.
it.
Yep.
Yeah. And if I don't want that, if I don't want them to read it, then I don't want it out in the world. So, so it's changed my life in that I've become much more introspective, maybe more thoughtful, less judgmental as a
Oh.
writer. He's
Yeah.
my buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Do you
Thank you.
find that that you're more observant, or at least more you take more notes when you're observant or something like that? So, I mean, has it changed your life that way? It's like something happens and it's like, oh, okay, I got to write this down, or I have to remember that. You see things in terms of story versus just life.
Well, you know what? During COVID, I did Linda Berry's. I don't know if anybody's know Linda Berry, the cartoonist.
Yeah,
and
I love Linda Berry.
Love Linda. I mean, I didn't know about her till anyway. I guess when I moved to New York, I first discovered her. But I started keeping a journal, just like she said, in 4 columns, and one of which forced you to draw, which was painful. But it was every day you had to write like 3 things you saw, 4 dialogue, 4.
Oh, that's great.
That is really cool.
Yeah, I like that.
Not journaling. It was just did, heard, saw, and a drawing. And it led me to take a drawing class actually at the 92nd Street Y because
Hey.
I was so out of mind. But anyway, so I think between the MFA and different things, I do see life differently. I do dialogue. I'm always writing. And
That's
although I
awesome.
don't keep as great of a journal now because I think as everyone during COVID, it was like, what am I going to write? I didn't
Right.
see anything. Everything I heard was bad.
Everything I heard was bad.
I'm in 600 square feet.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I do look at the world differently and think, oh, should I write that? Oh, I can write that. So
Yes. Well, and I think, even right inside the piece that you read tonight, how writing changed your life. Would you have even been at that, in this retreat sort of environment, and that writing of that letter to yourself from 76, I believe. And that was kind of a pivotal realization moment. I mean, I think in so many large and small ways that it really seems to have changed your life completely, and that's pretty incredible in ways that you were hoping for, and that's so exciting to hear.
Well, I do want to give a shout out because the facilitator, and I hardly ever name names, I try not to, but in this
Name
case,
them.
like Kate Gray, it was Kate Gray's.
No way, we had Kate Gray on here.
He wasn't Kate was the awesome leader of the writing, not the massager.
But yeah, we know Kate.
We love Kate Gray.
Yeah, I know you guys know Kate.
That's
And
great.
so yeah, that I have to say that writing workshop was a very pivotal moment.
Fabulous, Ellyn. We always get the best answers for this question. Just
We do.
incredible answers. Janet, we need to pass this question to you.
Yep.
Yeah.
What changed me in writing?
How has writing changed your life?
Yeah, well, I think you do become more observant. And I think being an artist helped with that idea that Ellyn's talking about, having to draw something. Because I think that the best writing is visual. You want the reader to pull up images of what you're writing about to see them. So that's been helpful. But I wrote really to finish a childhood dream of writing a book. And this was like a damn good story. Even when I was going through terrible times, it got a lot worse after this in the summer of that year.
Yeah.
So those things helped me understand myself better. That's why I did write. So I even when I was living through the hard things, I said, this would be a damn good story. So I've always had in mind for over 50 years to write it. So it felt like an accomplishment, but also to help me understand it, because it was a very confusing time. And so young. So it changed me by helping me understand myself.
Yeah.
And hopefully help others get through times now that are so similar.
Oh God.
And
Janet, did you keep a journal or a diary back then? I'm trying to think of like how you remembered all this.
Exactly.
So many details.
So I had a journal. I always was a diary keeper from childhood.
Oh, that's good.
And then soon after those events, I wrote it down. So just a few years after, from the journals, I wrote down a draft, and then put it under the, to live my life. I put it under the bed, wrote another draft 10 years later. And then my son was born. It goes under the bed. So finally in 2011, I got serious and joined a writing group. Yay. And Patrick McCord, Write Yourself Free, was just great. And he was one who he said, you need to have the protagonist needs to have a desire. So the reader needs to know, what do they want? And then what are the obstacles? And so I think that's what really propels the story, those things. So no, it's been terrific. So then in 2 years, I had a new draft. That would, I took 2 years to do, got a good draft, but then it took 8 more years with an editor to get it really, like, you admire some of the wording, I think you had said before.
Sure.
I appreciate. But that's the art and craft of it. So I had the story down.
Right.
But then the crafting and making it visual and punchy and riveting, as much as I could. So that's how. Yeah.
Janet, that is awesome. Sure. And I think you should see this comment that has been posted by Lindsay Vernon. Thank you for sharing your stories. This reading has been such a fascinating view into a momentous time in our history. It was delightful learning about your firsthand experience making such a great influence, how these people impacted your life's journey, and certainly how you impacted theirs. I ordered your book, and I can't wait to read it. And all of you out there should too.
There you go.
That is so lovely. And Chris, we have a question from Brenda.
Yes, we do. Yeah, Brenda Sorrells asked for both the writers. We'll start with you, Ellyn. If you could tell your younger writing self anything, sort of like your letter, but your younger writing self, what would it be?
Well, I didn't start writing until my 50s. So I would say early 50s, and now I'm 60. So I would say go for it. And I would say don't expect to be published in the New Yorker the next month or the next year or the next 10 years. But I think, write what you know, work hard at it. It's I'd like to say it's a daily practice, but I suck at that. So I wish it was a daily practice, but I would say when I am writing, I feel much better about myself and the world.
Yes.
And just button share.
Button share. Chris says that all the time.
Yeah.
BIC.
BIC.
Turn off those social media things and email. Like that's the,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think we're getting our pearls here, Katie.
I was just going to say that our famous last question is pearl of wisdom and a recommendation. So we'll save the recommendation, but
these are the pearls.
We just got a string of pearls from you, Ellyn. That's perfect.
So Janet, you said for a long time you intended to write this story, and it took you a while. So if you look back at your younger self when you saying, okay, I'm going to get to this, and you were writing to that younger Janet, what would you say?
I would say it's a story worth telling.
Absolutely.
and find the time to do it. And I like what Ellyn said about write what you know, because that's the advantage of memoir, right? Because it is about us, so we know it, firsthand. And to keep doing the journals. I think the timing was right for me somehow. I had written
Yeah.
it, but I didn't feel it was quite ready to be published.
Right.
My son's not in this book, but it's a pretty sensitive book. I didn't read the sex parts and other things.
Ah.
So I didn't want to hit him too hard with it when he was a teenager, or now he'll be 40. So I think it's time for him to know the truth.
He
Well,
can handle it.
So
I don't
I'm
know.
okay with the timing of the
It's
book.
still going to be tough. It's still going to be tough, but you can't wait forever.
Right.
No. Oh,
That's so
Janet,
fun.
that's great. I love the trusting in the timing, right? Like that process where you had where you wrote it and then you wrote again and then you waited, you put it under the bed. But there's a sense of like faith, like I have to do this, I want to do this, I will do this, but it's going to take the time that it takes. And when it's ready, it's going to be ready, and I'll be ready. And I love that sort of trust in that at the same time, while still making the pursuit, making it happen, making the plans, and coming back to it, but still kind of trusting that timing. I think that's awesome as well. Cool.
I have a question for oh, sorry, Kate.
No, go for it.
For Ellyn, I'm so interested in your your organizing principle of in this essay that you wrote, the various sort of threads that you weave, right? You have the trees, and then you have the retreat, and you have just these different elements that you kind of skip around with. How did that come to you right away? Like, that's how I'm going to tell the story, or did you try?
Did it emerge as you were writing?
Yeah, no, for sure it did not. I mean, I have a very trusted reader, Samantha Keller.
Hey,
oh yeah, we know Sam.
So Sam is my trusted reader always since 2015. Great. So I think, honestly, I think the story began when I found the uprooted tree more than anything. Yeah. And so it really wasn't the end, it was the beginning.
Yeah. And
for me, I read the book, The Secret Life of Trees, around the same time. Then I just started thinking about trees and life, and but
I love that.
And I always kind of wanted to write a braided essay, even though my teacher, Eugenia Kim, was like, I hate braided essays.
Eugenia!
I do.
I can hear her saying that.
If she ever watches this live stream, she's like, I hate braided essays. But I did want one day to figure out how, because I do like them, and I have read many of them in Best American Essays, and but I really want to write something that is so metaphorical that maybe you don't even understand it when you're writing it. And I didn't.
Yeah.
I have a question about that, because I think that's key, because you're writing obviously about, like, really, like you said, vulnerable, very personal stuff. And I think when it's almost like a magic trick. If it's like, if you're going at it in a way where you're jumping around like that, and you're braiding like that, then it becomes part of your mind is like, okay, this is kind of a technical exercise almost.
Right.
And I think sometimes you can allow that vulnerable stuff to come up to the surface, because you're paying attention to the other stuff. I wonder if that was like that for you, like you were saying, oh, okay, I'm gonna jump to this other thing, so that you don't burn out on it, or
I don't even know if it's that intentional, is it?
I don't know. I think it's that you don't dwell. It kind of takes you away from, like, you don't want to be like navel gazing or be self-absorbed in your own pain, right? You just
Yes, yes.
want to tell a story, and I don't know. I love the idea of bringing nature into a story and
Yeah.
writing, and so that's.
I almost
don't
feel like
know.
the braided essay is more authentic in a way. It reminds me of poetry in that it feels associative, like you're moving from this memory to this story, and then you're connecting it back, and it almost feels like almost like a way that our memory works. Like how often is it like super linear or completely
Right.
planned out? I love it. I love it. I disagree, Eugenia Kim.
Well,
No, I do too, and I
I
think,
love you, Eugenia. I love you.
and I think when you're writing, you can dig deeper because
You
of it.
can.
right. I think
But-
so. I think you can write it. Yeah, it's maybe. Yeah, I don't know. This was a long time in the making. Obviously, I mean, I
Awesome.
think 2018, 20. It's probably 3 years of
Yeah.
writing this essay, and
Cool.
yeah. So having the Fish anthology choose it was, again, I was like, no, Clem Cairns is the editor. I was like, when he emailed me, I'm like, I want it back. I want it back.
Ah, that's so
I
funny.
definitely say that I was never going to read it tonight. It took, 2 days of reading other work out loud to decide that.
It was it was
Awesome.
like perfectly timed too, and it was just absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
Great.
Thank you.
I have a quick question for Janet before we
Yep.
move to our recommendation question. Janet, in your bio, one of the many awesome things that you have done, which we don't even have time to ask you about all of those amazing things, but one of the things is that you've written a book, there were affirmations for creatives, and I'm
Yes.
dying to hear one or two of your affirmations.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
Yeah, grab it, Janet.
Yeah.
Go out and buy this too, people.
Let's see. Well, here's one. I have. There are 12 different areas. This one is I seek inspiration everywhere. Is this chapter? So
I love that. That's a great
raw
affirmation.
material. I gather raw material for creativity from everyone I meet, from everyday sounds I hear, and from images that are everywhere to be found.
Love it.
This is the second affirmation. I am continuously inspired by the beauty in nature, a cat purring, an orchid's beard, the startling red of a cardinal.
I love it, Janet. I love it.
That's a book of
That's great.
affirmations on creativity.
And that's,
Fabulous.
I mean, that's like sort of a cousin of the Linda Berry stuff, sort of like keep your eyes peeled, basically, and write it all down and draw pictures while you're at it too.
Yeah.
I love that. I love
Be
that.
creative, right? Just be creative. I mean,
Yeah, I'll be teaching a course to Creativity Matters, starting in February, and it's it's just for fun. It's no artistic talent or experience is necessary, but it's for all. I think they're all related. I think if you can do music, I haven't explored that, but music and dance and
Janet, where are you teaching this course?
Oh, it's on Zoom.
On
Yes,
Zoom?
on Zoom.
Okay. Oh, it's just with you. We can connect with you to join
Yes,
in.
you can connect with me and find out. Creativity Matters.
I love that, Janet. Thank you so much.
You're
And
welcome.
literally just in this moment, my mom sent me the Amazon link for your affirmations book. Thanks, Mom. That is so great.
Your mom probably remembers the 60s.
Well, both of my parents do, and I'm sure they're sitting there. Actually, my my father, I don't know, it's just, make my dad blush a little bit, but he actually defended draft dodgers. He was an Army lawyer as they were coming back from Canada. I hope I'm saying all the facts, but that's one of the things that he did when he was kind of an army lawyer. So yeah, I'm sure they have all kinds of memories from this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Anyways,
right.
we have to get to our recommendation question. Before we do, I feel like we just need a round of applause for both of you. Ellyn Gelman, Janet Luongo.
you,
You're both
Ellyn.
absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Brava, brava.
A recommendation. Ellen, give us a book recommendation.
recommendation.
A book you're loving right now.
Anything.
Anything.
Anything that floated
Oh
your
gosh. Geez, I'm gonna forget the writer's name. Helen. Disappearing Earth. It's fiction.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. And then of course, you know,
Chris
I
has
love,
it.
yeah, I do too. The latest one that I absolutely, you know, she's just amazing is I just gave it to my friend. Matrix, you know,
Lauren Groff.
Lauren Groff, Matrix,
Okay.
most beautiful writing. So both of those, Disappearing Earth and Matrix by Lauren Groff.
Awesome.
Disappearing Earth. I maybe if Sam is still on, she'll type in the Sam and I love Disappearing Earth. She'll type in the author.
Yeah, look, a couple of fiction recommendations. How about that?
Yeah, I read everything. So, but those two stuck with me. And then I think this month in the New Yorker, there was a great fiction, but I really think it's so thinly veiled about you know, COVID-19, this man turned 70 and shuts down. I think it's, I don't know if it's the latest New Yorker or the one before, but I think it's the latest.
I haven't gotten to that one yet, but yeah, I look forward to that.
Yeah, it's really good. And he just writes kind of like a stream of consciousness starting. Cool. Yeah. So he decided to quit in May of 2020. Exercising, quit walking. Yeah. I just didn't feel like it was fiction. So
it felt too real.
It sounds like this is not fiction.
This sounds like this guy's life. I hear you, Ellen. That's awesome. Thank you for the fabulous recommendations. Sam just put Julia Phillips.
Julia Phillips.
That's who it was.
Yeah.
I knew Phillips was right. Yes, we knew that. I have it somewhere. Anyway, Janet.
Yeah.
Book recommendation, one or two, or.
Well, for a memoir, I really think any book by Mary Carr is incredible. So her language is so exciting. Amanda Gorman's poems. Her latest one was just a knockout. And I would say that I'm reading right now The Myth of the Goddess, which I love. It's about the Neolithic goddesses and Paleolithic before that being worshipped, and why the feminine principle of Mother Earth and the continuation of life, renewal, constant renewal.
Nice. Fabulous recommendations from both of you. Thank you so much. You know, we have this richness of your work tonight, and also these great recommendations too. We just want to thank you both once again for being our guests this evening, for sharing your work with us, and for answering all of our questions. Thank you so much, Ellyn Gelman and Janet Luongo.
Thank you. Thank you for spreading the word of our books and ideas.
Absolutely. And don't forget to go see all of your comments, all of your love, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and that it's archived. You can send it, share it to friends who weren't able to watch live.
Yeah, and I'll be able to concentrate on I'll look at the archive to hear Ellen, because I couldn't concentrate tonight.
You were so
I wanted to hear
pre-reading anxiety.
It was great.
Thanks, Janet.
You have a treat ahead.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Have a good night, everyone, and see you next Sunday.
Thank you. Thank you.